This is stressful waiting for the event to start.
I know. It takes a bit of time. And we're live. Hello and welcome everyone to the main event. I'm Meeta, Sahni, and I'm so pleased to be joined by our returning original guest, Tosh Polpitiye. Hi, Tosh.
Hi, Meeta. Thanks very much for asking me back. I do enjoy these. You know, I was just telling you before this started, we used to do this during the COVID time. So, way back then. And I had somebody that watched one of those webinars back in the day that called me for some help about a situation in the workplace. So, that was always the idea, wasn't it? Put some good out there, put some information, and you're still doing it. So fantastic.
Thank you. Well, it's good to have you back. And exactly that, I was going to let the audience know, for those who are first timers, I was going to do a bit of housekeeping. And for the old timers like me and Tosh, you'll remember that the premise behind the main event is all around helping organizations, businesses, charities, organizations not just have employees that join, but employees that stay, and that the journey is a positive one for the people and the employer. And Tosh, we bring a good balance, don't we? Because we talk a lot about the kind of supporting of the people, but also I know you like to bring in the fact that businesses and organizations have a job to do, and it's getting that balance.
Yeah, I mean, when people talk about law and rights, everybody thinks about employees, and I appreciate that's because that's where people bring the claims. But employers also have rights, and they also should know, have the power to know what to do and what to say and how to handle situations. Because they're trying to run a business, they're also stressed. Yeah. So one of the things we're all familiar with is mental health and stress. It's often it's a buzzword, but there's a broad spectrum, isn't it? We all need stress. There's good stress and bad stress. Yeah. I need stress to get out of bed. I'll just have a lie-in, won't I? So, but the reality is you need certain types of stress. What you don't need is excessive pressure. You don't need excessive stress or bad stress in that sense. So we're going to talk about some of that as well. But, in terms of legal liabilities, the law doesn't expect employers to eliminate pressure. As I say, they just expect you to take steps to avoid excessive pressure and stress. And you have to do certain things. And failing to do those things can lead to consequences. So that's what we need to kind of address.
I'm looking forward to it. So the title of today's session is Workplace Stress and an Employment Law Update. Out there in the world, we know that when the Labour government came in, they spoke about putting some laws into place to protect workers in that space. Those laws are coming in 2026. So Tosh and I are going to run through those. I have some statistics from Reuters that says that British workplaces rank amongst the worst in Europe. Long hours, tight deadlines, limited autonomy, and no more productivity to show for it. So that's what Tosh and I are going to look at today, is how we can help everyone who's watching this in real time or watching the recording afterwards to be able to go away and not only have a happy and stress-free team, but also a productive and engaged team. Quick bit of housekeeping, Tosh, before we get into it then. So we like to run this session for about 45 minutes. We know time is precious, so we're aiming to finish at 12:45. We make it interactive. So we've got a chat box here. I would really love for everyone to use this chat box to give you the information and answers you need. So first of all, I've just thrown a hello out there. Can I get a hello back from the room? Just so I know you can hear us, see us, and all is well, and we can see who's out there. We've got something like 150 different businesses in the room today, so it's an important topic. Finally, the last bit of housekeeping. You will get a recording after today's session. So you're here because this is important for your organization. Please feel free to share this with your colleagues, senior leadership, or anyone in your world that you think could benefit from understanding the challenges and positive impacts that can be made by working in a smart and collaborative way. And actually, there is one more thing. We have a poll. We like to get the sentiment of the room, and we like to understand what you in particular are challenged of. And so then Tosh and I will try to guide the session accordingly. So the question today is, what area of workplace stress stresses you the most? First one was having the conversation. That's currently running at 10%. The next one is the legal responsibilities. That's running at 36%. So that's up there alongside the other top one, which is impact on your organization. Seeing the signs comes in at 10%. And we've got some other, which is 10%. So I'd love for you to put into the chat box what those others is. Hi, Mike. Hi, Sally, everyone. We're getting lots of hellos. So that's fantastic. If you have put other, in the poll. Can you let me know what that is, please? And on that note, we will get started.
I wanted to say one more thing, Meeta, which is this is not a situation where we do the webinar and then we just do questions at the end. If you've got any questions, please put them in now. If you've got some situations you're dealing with, talk to us right now. We'll literally do it live with you to help you get a solution for whatever challenges you're dealing with. You know, you're here for a reason in this topic, which I presume means you've got something going on or something is of interest. Either you've got it going on or it's going on in your workplace. So please ask. We'll be happy to address it. And if it's something that's a bit longer, I'm happy to take it offline and just talk to you, just for free, just to figure out if we can help that way. Okay?
Absolutely. Awesome. Right, well, with statistics like that, with 91% of employees reporting experiences of stress at work, where do we start, Tosh? We've got the legal issues coming up, but where do we start? What do you think we need to be doing?
Start with what does stress in the workplace actually mean? And I think the three words that we would know would be productivity, retention, and health. So why don't we start with those three things?
Okay.
So I think you're the lady with the stats, but productivity-wise, obviously, employees under chronic stress are going to be less effective, be more prone to errors, and which means that they can be exposed to more liability to employers for various claims. Right? Stress in the workplace isn't a claim in itself as such, unless you've got a psychiatric illness, then it's like a personal injury claim. But if we're talking about normal stress, then it might follow from a bullying in the workplace, for example. Or maybe if an employee isn't treating them correctly, so there's undue pressure, and it could lead to constructive dismissal claims. Or if there's a chronic illness as a result of productivity, you could end up having a disability potentially, and then you can have those sorts of claims. So productivity is a key element, isn't it?
It is, and I think aligning that with absenteeism and then presenteeism as well. You know, the behaviours that manifest because of stress can often be misread. So I think a lot of what we need to think about as well is how we equip managers, team leaders, leadership to create an environment that can very quickly spot challenges, whether it's a medical first aider, whether it's a buddy system. I think what I want to instill in here is that we can actually have a really robust and engaged working environment, but there just needs to be some checks and balances along the way.
I think it's a two-way street, Meeta. So if the employee feels comfortable enough to raise issues, well, that's a great environment, isn't it? Secondly, but then the employee also has eyes. You know, sometimes people see things happening and they don't do anything about it until somebody raises a complaint. They didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, so what? You don't have to wait till the blood coming out of their arm to see that there's a wound necessarily. You know, if you can see the signs or the symptoms, step in. You know, be proactive about it.
Yeah. Well, look, we're starting out in what workplace stress is. We've actually already got a couple of comments in the box. So shall we go to them just to see if we can cover this off early on? So Sally and Lenka both have questions. And these are, the first one says, dealing with people off sick with stress when you are sure they are actually okay.
So you mean they're just faking it, you mean? Is that what the question is?
Yeah, I think that's what Sally might mean.
I'd be interested to know why Sally says that. So the reality is this, right? If somebody's off sick, anybody can go off sick and go to the doctors right now and say, I'm stressed. And they have to write me off because there's nothing the doctor can do apart from make an assessment, unless obviously I'm a really, really bad actor, right?
Yeah.
So the reality is if you believe they're pulling a fast one, the first time they're going off with stress, well, that's one thing. If they're off for a few days or a week, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if they're consistently off with that, Sally, and you think that's not right, then you get a medical report. And you get the GP to write up to say, what is the stress? What is the cause of it? What is going on? So that you can deal with it. But that's more of a longer term thing where there's some sort of a pattern, right? Maybe it's infrequent patterns. Maybe they're stressed once every month and they go off, or maybe it's for a period of time. But if it's frequent or long enough, you get a medical report, and they don't have to be cost prohibitive. And when you get the medical report, you ask the right questions for the doctor to put the information. So the questions you would ask are, what is the nature of the condition? What is causing it? How long has it lasted? What can we do about it? This is what their job involves. What do you expect us to do so that they can do their job? And then we get to the root of it, okay? In that sense. So when you say you know it or you feel it, there's not a lot you can do in the short term unless you've got some evidence to say that they're swinging the lead. So believe it or not, I had a work colleague in a former job and former life who went off sick. And the director caught him standing at a train platform. And obviously the sickness he was talking about was something that he couldn't come into work. So if there's evidence of any kind to show that they're swinging the leg, that's fine. Otherwise, you have to go with the process. The other thing I would say, though, is have a return to work meeting. So it's easy, isn't it, when somebody goes off sick and they come back and they just slide back into their desk and get on with their work. Well, when they've got to get how they felt and address direct questions you've got, it's more awkward for them. So, Sahni, why don't you have a sit down, have a return to work meeting and really kind of grill them about what they're stressed about?
So I'm going to ask what might be a really obvious question to a lot of people, but when somebody is off sick and the employer wants to do a check-in, are employers allowed to call a person who is signed off with stress?
Yeah, I get that a lot. The employees say, well, they can't call me, can they? Or they're in a disciplinary process and they say, well, that stops the whole thing because I'm off sick. No, it doesn't. World still turns. So, yes, you can call an employee when they're off sick. You can do a check-in. What you don't do is harass them. It's not being excessive with it. It's just reasonable, even if it's about work. As long as you're not taking them through all the different bits and you need to do a handover, right? So you need to figure out how things operate. But I generally say, unless you're doing a genuine check-in, just avoid it. Imagine the employee's fallen under a bus. That's a terrible phrase. What are you going to do? You're going to just have to figure it out, aren't you? How to do it without them. But yes, you can call them. There's nothing wrong with you contacting them, getting a check-in, getting them to cooperate to see what we can do to get them back to work. And if they don't cooperate, well, then you can only deal with the information that's at hand, which will then ultimately end up in a disciplinary process or a dismissal. They've got to cooperate.
Absolutely. And then I think Heather has commented saying on the basis that the doctor will just then repeat what the colleague has told them, then she favours asking them specifically what the stresses are and what we can do. I think that's excellent advice.
That's key in the questions that you don't ask the employee to get the report, you write to the doctor. You get a medical consent form, you write to the doctor and you ask relevant questions. And the relevant questions, A, relate to the nature of the condition, and B, relate to what the job is. So, you're stressed. Why does that affect the ability to do the job? This is what their job is: standing, sitting, walking, lifting, whatever it is. Yeah. And then the doctor has to give some guidance. Now, when the doctor gives some guidance, they're not telling you how to run your business. They're giving you some guidance. You then take that and say, well, that doesn't work. In which case we go down a capability meeting. Or
sorry. Slow down. What did you just say? We do a what meeting?
We do a capability meeting.
Okay.
Because they're not capable of doing the work. And the adjustments that the doctor has recommended isn't something that we can reasonably do.
Then what happens there?
Then we call them to a meeting. Capability meeting is like a disciplinary meeting, but it's to do with their capability rather than their conduct.
Yeah.
If they're too sick and they can't do the job and we can't make adjustments to help them do the job, then they get dismissed with notice. That's a legitimate fair redundancy, termination due to capability. Because what else can the employer do? You don't just keep on the books when they can't do the job.
So it's about having the right systems in place so that when an employee does call in sick, you can have the conversations where you can establish, is this real? Is it not? If it is real, then how can we get you back to work? And then if that person says, I can't do the job anymore, you can then have a capability meeting that could potentially end up in a dismissal.
I mean, typically, yes, but typically the employee will never say, I can't do the job anymore. They just say, I'm sick. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So then we will say, well, we've gone to the doctors. The doctor says we need to do this. We can't do those things. Therefore, there's nothing else we can reasonably do. So we now bring this employment relationship to an end.
And do you know what, Tosh? I'm always on the side that as an employer, we should look at our employees holistically. We hire them to do a job. We have very high stress as businesses and organizations to achieve certain outcomes. And we bring the right people on the bus to achieve those outcomes, but challenges arise along the way. However, it's that balance. And you have just defined that you treat people fairly, respectfully, consistently, aligned with the cultures, behaviors, and values of the organization. But alongside that, there has to be a consideration of what the outcomes are that the business needs to be achieving. Is that
correct? Correct. Absolutely right. I can see there's another question which we skipped there, I think, from...
No, we're going to come back to Lenka. Okay. Absolutely. And it's quite interesting because then this comes to... Lenka speaks about the fact that some people have stress, a bigger stress tank than others and can handle more. And her comment was that, Tosh, you mentioned an employer is not expected to eliminate workplace stress, but has to address excessive stress. But where does the line really lie? But isn't it the case that we're doing the session today, one, because workplace stress is becoming more and more prevalent, but also because the government have said, actually, employers do need to eliminate workplace stress or put the checks, measures and balances in to reduce it?
It's impossible to eliminate, and I'm going to use the word pressure rather than just stress. It's impossible to eliminate that. There's got to be some level of urgency in your work. unless you've got a job that doesn't have any urgency. I can't think of one. But there's something that's time effective, presumably, which is why you have to work those hours. There's got to be something that you need to do. So to suggest that you need to eliminate any kind of stress, when this is not some balloons and puppy dogs and walking in the fields kind of experience, but it can be still stuff we love to do. We love what we're doing at Meeta, but there's a lot of stress involved in it.
Yeah.
But so with the benefits, there are things you have to also take sacrifices as well. So where is the line? She's absolutely right. It's really, there's different people will tolerate different stresses. So the line will be how far you can reasonably accommodate those different people. Yeah. So the person who can take a lot of stress, well, there's no problem, is there? They're just taking it, but you've got to look out for them. Because before you know it, they suffer from work burnout, which we're going to end up talking about. You just keep going till you drop. But the ones where they can't do anything, well, hang on a minute, there's still a standard. The other one's pushing it too far, so you just make sure they're okay. The other one that's not doing enough, well, then that's the line, isn't it? Where are they performing to your satisfaction is what I would say, Lenka.
They have to be
able to perform to your satisfaction, your reasonable satisfaction, then we do something about it. That's got to be the line.
And I think there's two sides to this. So, you mentioned about burnout. We're actually running a separate webinar to this, which is all around overcoming burnout and preventing it for employees. And like, as Lenka has said, everyone has a different level at which their pot overflows, if you like. I think of burnout as a kind of pot simmering away, and then when too much is put in, over it flows. But everyone has a different propensity to when that's going to happen. Exactly that, their resilience. So there's a training side that is helping employers and managers have the conversations and how to deal with the process. But the other side of it is helping employees to understand what's required of them and how they can achieve that with their level of resilience and approach, right? It's two-sided.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's just understanding what that balance is. Obviously also understanding the mindset of different people. As employers, I mean, I've got to be really, really bad not to go into work because I'm sick. I don't get sick very often. But when you're not working for yourself or working for a business where you're what's the word, invested, then you will think of it just as a job. When you think of it just as a job, you have a different mindset about the whole thing, don't you?
Yeah, it's this is why it's a fine line, and I'm glad we're talking about it. And actually, what I really like about it is it's getting us all thinking that we have to get the right outcomes for the business, right outcomes for the organization, and right outcomes for the people. Some will opt in and do the work, and others will not work out. And through the session, we're going to help employers think about all of those angles and how to deal with them. Lenka just commented that she likes how you flip it from stress to pressure. And that's a good work point, a good viewpoint. And exactly that. What's quite interesting is in these statistics, employees speak about autonomy and the fact that they're under a lot of pressure to achieve a certain amount of work in a certain amount of time. But surely that's standard 101 requirement of any job that we do, no?
I suppose it just depends whether the expectations are unreasonable or not. That's the point, isn't it? You can keep pushing. And also, as an employer, I might push myself quite hard in what I do. That doesn't mean you should have the same expectations of your staff, because they're not running the business. They don't have those same sorts of things. They've maybe got families. They've got different lifestyle going on. Yeah. So, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. We're doing what we do. So our expectations also need to be kind of kept in check. So that's what it would be. Yes, there are deadlines, but if I'm giving them 20 cases in my case, and all the deadlines are by this afternoon, well, someone's going to have a breakdown. You can't physically do it.
So let's do this. Let's start. We've started talking about what workplace stress is, and we've actually touched on the fact that the employer does have a role. We've spoken about how they can deal with the challenges around stress, absenteeism, things like that. But actually, what I think is really important for us to remember is that there's a level of stress, as you said, Tosh. It's almost like, remember the cars of old, you used to pull the choke and you'd put a bit of petrol and it would zing to life. But if you pressed too much on the petrol pedal, the gas pedal, you'd flood the car. And I think stresses can be seen that way, that there's a good amount of stress that gets us up, gets us going, gets us through the day. But then there can be a level of stress that starts to weigh people down and brings them down and prevents them from striving and thriving,
Yes.
And in terms of those signs, I just wanted to go through a little bit about what those signs look like. So the healthy side is that people come in energized, focused, they're meeting their deadlines, they're motivated rather than overwhelmed, and they haven't reached that burnout level. But there are 4 different areas that can start to manifest when people are flipping over. One is their behavior. So they withdraw, they start getting bickery with their colleagues, they stop caring about deadlines, they get irritable. Physically, employees can start to have digestive issues, headaches, lack of sleep, and just start emotionally as well, coming in looking just lacking in confidence, not believing in themselves, talking about feeling like the role is too much, feeling overwhelmed. And then what manifests is they start to get sick, they miss deadlines, they're less engaged, they're late. And so all of that it is reducing productivity and engagement, right?
Yeah, from a legal, you've done it in a nutshell. I've got some notes here that I keep darting down to every now and again. And one of them, I've got the warning signs in legal cases, particularly from lawyer's point of view, is repeated sickness absence. So we were mentioning that earlier. You have to return to work meeting, find out, call them while they're sick. If they're off sick, why? Complaints about unreasonable workloads is a very common one for legal cases that will then lead on to constructive dismissal claims, or they feel discrimination, and evidence of burnout behaviours. Right. So burnout behaviours is what you're talking about: looking really tired, maybe not getting enough sleep, fatigue. In fact, you've got a webinar on this coming up in next month, haven't you?
Yeah.
What kind of evidence? I mean, but I don't know if you've ever suffered from burnout, Meeta. I have. We keep pushing it. You can take so much sometimes, but then you keep going, you work it out. But having the right balance is really important. But if you can see these things, I'm saying eyeball it. If you can see it, don't wait for a complaint or wait for someone to drop. Do something about it.
And do you know what? Absolutely. The reason we're doing this course is because there's so many layers in a business, right? You've got the leadership, you've got the management, you've got the team on the ground, you might have the juniors, you've got stakeholders that are adjacent that pop in and out. Everyone has eyes and ears, right? And yet sometimes people themselves are so stressed that they haven't got the capacity to hold space to acknowledge or deal with somebody else's. So when we're dealing with burnout, when we're doing anything in this session of this topic, it has to be consistent throughout the organization. So actually all of this stress management and preventing burnout and achieving results it should align with culture. Actually,
that also shows people give a damn, as in employers do, and employees really appreciate that. Actually, more than pay rises and stuff, just give a damn. You know what I mean? And that's what relates to more retention as well, because
exactly. I was going to say that we're in the game of attracting the right people to the right organizations and retaining them. But employees will not go and work for an employer where they don't have a good reputation for taking care of their people. Employees understand it's a two-way street, but you've got so many doors and so much access to inside information of what it's like to work in an organization. You've got Glassdoor, you've got TikTok, you've got culture meetings during the interview process. Employees pick up on everything, and that interview process is to build that trust and confidence. So if they're getting warning signs, they're going to deselect themselves from the interview process. And we know how long, time consuming and dehumanizing it can be for employer and employee when you just don't have anyone at the end of a process. So
I mean, it's a number one issue is how people feel looked after and cared for in terms of retention. And understanding those benefits that aren't just features under the contract is really important. Obviously, that becomes more and more difficult as the companies get larger, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's key.
Yeah. Well, look, Heather's asking how we recommend to educate. Well, we do have our burnout session, which you can sign up for, Heather. We'll share that out with everyone, actually. That's actually looking at symptoms of burnout, what stress spots are, identifying what's happening, what's robbing and draining people of energy, boundary setting, and the stories people tell themselves and employers tell themselves to mask dealing with things and then fueling burnout. So this is a 1.5 hour session on the 8th of October, which is going to help employees and employers find the tools to prevent it. Other than that, Heather, I would say do a training course, or get a first aid a mental health first aider who can actually become the eyes and ears. And it can't be one for the whole organisation, depending on the size of the organisation. It would be 1 to perhaps 50, where they can actually have eyes on and ears on what's going on. So Tosh, I'm going to come to legal frameworks, because we're about 20 minutes out from the end of the session, and I feel like we're just actually getting into it. But we've touched on the fact that it can go from good stress to bad stress. We've touched a bit on the signs of it. So what are an employer's responsibilities? What are the employer responsibilities towards stress management in the workplace, and what are they liable for if they don't do that?
So I've got 4 particular legal frameworks that every employer should understand and have a general idea about.
Yeah.
Look at my notes, so excuse me if I knock that down a bit now and again. So the first one is the Health and Safety at Work Act 74, which imposes a duty to protect employees' mental health as well as physical health. Okay. So you have an obligation, you have a legal obligation to take reasonable steps to prevent those things from happening, or if you're aware those things have already happened, to take then steps to do what you can do to recover from the situation, okay, to resolve it. That means getting maybe medical evidence or seeing what you can reasonably do as an employer. The second law is the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations in 1999, which requires risk assessments for stress and evidence that steps were taken to reduce it. Now, a risk assessment doesn't mean necessarily you've got to get a doctor in. A risk assessment, you could do it, Meeta. You can go in the situation, talk to the department and make an assessment. Then obviously you need to decide whether you want to get a more detailed assessment. So the one, who was it that said that? Sally, well, where that person, they're swinging the lead. You don't need to get a doctor in to do it, but you can give them a bit of an interview, let's say. I'll take an interrogation, Sally, but give them an interview and get to the bottom of it, because you can make your assessment, right? How bad is it? Really? Are you really that stressed? Give us the circumstances. The third law is the Equality Act. So that's to do with all the 9 protected characteristics, race, sex, religion, disability, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And under the Equality Act, where there's a mental health condition or a physical one that's lasted at least 12 months or is likely to last 12 months, could amount to a disability in law, and then employers have an obligation to make what's called reasonable adjustments. Yeah. Failing to make those reasonable adjustments can lead to awards of compensation of up to about 60 grand, roughly. So they're called injury to feelings. Yeah. And the fourth framework is the Employment Rights Act, which protects employers from dismissal or detriment where health is a factor. So mishandling and stress cases frequently lead to either unfair dismissals, so if you haven't done the capability process correctly, or if they're mishandled, the employee could resign and claim constructive dismissal. So those are the 4 legal areas. So if I put it in a nutshell, it's again, giving a damn about the employees, finding out what's going on. If it's something, finding out by doing a proper assessment. Proper assessment means you can do it. Somebody to just, as a human being, to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, if you don't know what's going on, somebody that can. And if there's a disability issue involved, and it can be mental or physical, and just because somebody says stress doesn't mean that they have a disability. Okay. Yeah. It's got to meet certain requirements, but one of them is it's got to have lasted at least 12 months. So scenarios where employees have got a history of depression, for example, and then they come in and it's recurring, they could be regarded as having a disability. So when you see stress on a sick note, that doesn't send alarm bells to me. When I see depression on a sick note, that sets alarm bells up, because you have different obligations. Okay.
Because depression is a mental illness.
It can be. It can be. It lasts at least 12 months. I'm sure, we've all suffered from depression in our lives, suffered tragedies. I know you and I both have recently, but we don't stay there. So my point is, some people can't get out of it, and when you can't get out of it, it could constitute disability. So the employer's got obligations. So find out. That's what legal obligation is. Just find out what the situation is as much as possible.
And what I would add to that, because what I love about your approach is it's very pragmatic. It's very neutral, because it is a 2-way street, employer and employee, and finding that safe and sweet spot. But also the fact that at the end of it, you've got to have the right outcomes that are sustainable for both parties, right? It's got to be solution driven, but
not exactly, Meeta. It's got to be sustainable for the employer. Okay. It doesn't have to be sustainable for the employee, because if the employee can't do the job, they can't do the job. Yeah. So the starting point, which everybody I think forgets, including the employee sometimes, is they were there to do a job. Yeah. Now our obligation is to help them do that job. If we've done everything we can do, which means training, put in place measures in place because of medical reasons, done everything we can reasonably do, not everything possible, everything reasonable, well, then your obligation is over. So it's the employer that has the standard. It's just got to be a reasonable one.
And to the extent, and again, I'm not trying to plug the webinar that we're doing on the
Of course you are. Just do it shamelessly, please.
But if an employer does put their people on a course like this, would that be seen as supporting the employees, and would that go in favour if somebody were to want to bring a case against their employer to say they haven't supported me and I'm really stressed out?
So the answer is yes, in the sense that if it ever got to a case, what any judges want to see is what have they done to prevent these things from happening. So they would have done some things, right? Whatever they would have done. If that stems from the webinar, and I imagine the webinar will be a foundation, a good starting point, but actually then to go deeper into it, will probably be what would be needed. Then yes, that would be more than sufficient. But what we're really talking about is emotional intelligence, aren't we?
Yeah.
If we just cut it into a nutshell, and you've either got that in you, that you give a damn about people. I love using that phrase repeatedly during this webinar for some reason. If they give a damn about people, it kind of comes naturally, doesn't it?
It does. And the fact is that not all managers do give a damn, because some don't realise that their role isn't to direct, but it is to support, lead, inspire, and help their employees.
Going on, Meeta. They've also got their own job, and oh, come on, do we need to do that now? Can you just get on with it? It doesn't work like that.
Well, that's why it has to be every layer. For me, it's about starts at the top.
Agreed.
Everyone has to have the same training, and you know what I say is that everyone in the room today will be at some scale along the line of stress in the workplace and how it's managed and how people are supported and how outcomes are achieved. What we're here to do is help you stack the odds towards a better balance and a better outcome for the business and everyone. But Tosh, you're absolutely right. You always say that, ultimately, if an organization can't be sustained, there's no point getting it right for the employee if the organization can't sustain itself by doing that. So the ultimate is that an organization, if they can prove, and the other thing is making the right notes to every step of the way, that they can prove that they've taken reasonable adjustments, they've had decent conversations, they've checked in with people, and it's all noted. That goes so far to show that we are trying to work with our people, whether that person then says it's working for me or not. Yeah,
exactly right. So I suppose the takeaway at the moment is give a damn, and it'll just work out.
Yeah. Look, we've talked to, we've touched on the frameworks. What are the new legislations coming in 2026?
So I've got a different screen here. So excuse me if I look away to it, because there was a lot. And I don't want to spend the next 20 minutes talking through the different kinds of cases for you. Everyone will fall asleep.
Thank you, Tosh. Well, this is high up there. The two things that are high up there are the impact on the organisation, which I think we've been talking quite a bit about. And the next strongest one was legal responsibilities. So
I want to talk about things coming up in 2026 and key developments. And I'd also like to talk about a couple of things in 2027, which is also important. Most people would have heard of it and probably would have heard like day one rights. But we all thought it was going to happen soon, but it's not. It's not going until 2027 by the looks of it. So the first thing in 2026 I'm going to talk about is collective redundancies. So people I don't know what the vibe is that you're seeing out there, Meeta, but I am experiencing lots of inquiries about redundancies at the moment. Yeah. And from April 26, if you don't follow a proper consultation period and follow them collectively, the compensation award was 90 days pay for each employee. That's going to double to 180 days pay. So that's from April. So anybody going through collective redundancies, make sure you're up to speed with the processes.
Yeah.
There's someone at the doorbell. There's a fire rehire becomes automatically unfair. So in the old days, you could fire somebody. So let's say they didn't sign their restrictive covenants and you were worried about something, so you can look, we'll fire you, and then we'll re-employ you with you sign the contract.
You
can't do that anymore. Okay. It's automatically unfair. Okay. Statutory sick pay, again from April 26, will become available from day one, as will parental rights from day one.
Okay. So practically, just talk us through that.
So at the moment, you need to have 3 qualifying days. So the first 3 days are unpaid unless the contract gives you an enhanced payment for sick pay, right? Contractual sick pay.
Yeah.
Now, from day one, you will have to pay statutory sick pay. That's it.
Got it? Yeah. And then the next one, what was that?
The other one was parental rights from day one.
Yeah.
So we talk about dads and so forth. There needs to be a period of time they used to have to work before they were qualifying. That qualification is gone, and it will be from day one.
And so that's mums and dads, right? So if somebody
parental leave and paternity leave, so it's mums and dads.
Yeah. So if somebody currently, they have to have worked for the organization for 26 weeks.
That's right.
Before they qualify for SMP.
Yes.
Or again, if there's an enhanced package that's offered, that's contractual and specific to that company.
Yes.
Now it's due on day one.
Not SMP, not maternity pay. We're talking about parental leave. Parental leave is slightly different. Parental leave is for dads, adoptees, those sorts of scenarios. People will have those rights from day one. Maternity leave provisions haven't changed, aren't changing yet.
Yeah. Okay, good thing I checked.
There's also something called there's establishment of a fair work agency. I think that's going to be a big one. It's expected in April 26, and basically it's a centralized enforcement of rights like statutory sick pay, holiday pay, and other protections. And it basically provides one regulatory body that you can go to. So I imagine that will be the first port of call before we start looking at tribunal cases, and they will then start to make enforcements. I don't know what those penalties will be yet, but that's going to come into play next year in April.
So a question on that one, how is that different to ACAS right now, would you say?
So ACAS are not an enforcement body. They're not a regulatory body either. So ACAS are a government body designed to resolve workplace disputes. So they're like conciliators. Yeah. It's in the title, in fact, ACAS conciliators, right?
Yeah.
Or mediators. That's what they do. These guys aren't mediators. These are enforcers.
Got it. Okay.
So that will be the difference. There were consequences. So it's a little bit like the Information Commissioner's Office. You know, people don't follow GDP obligations, or they breach certain rules. You go and complain to them, and they can do something about it.
Yeah. Okay.
There will be so from October 26, extended protections and changes in harassment law. So there's going to be a duty to prevent harassment from third parties. So that means clients and customers.
Yeah.
And you have to take all reasonable steps. So at the moment, it's just reasonable steps. That's going to be all. So that means when you've got your staff going off site to other places, and they could be exposed to harassment, you need to make sure you've done everything possible for that not to happen. Training in place, measures in place, warnings. It doesn't mean you can stop it, but obviously if you've shown you can done everything you can do to train staff for these situations, then you pretty much be protected.
Okay.
There's also I'm not sure if it's going to go through, where there are post-termination restrictions or restrictive covenants.
Yeah.
That the law will limit these potentially to only 3 months.
Wow. Okay.
Rather than longer periods. And then another thing for lawyers in particular is that the time limits for employment tribunals will extend from, which is presently 3 months, to 6 months, which means there'll be more scope to entertain more types of claims. So I think the floodgates will open as a result of that, because people have more time to bring claims into place, right?
Right.
And what I wanted to talk about in 2027, which is a key one, is the day one employment rights. So day one. So at the moment, do you know how many years you have to be employed to claim unfair dismissal?
2 years.
That's right. 2 is the magic number. 2 years.
Yeah.
So that means you can fire anybody for any reason, as long as it's not discriminatory, if they've got less than 2 years, right?
Yeah.
With a notice pay and so forth. After this, once this law comes into place at some point in 2027, the idea is they have day one rights. So if you don't follow a correct process and have a fair reason, they can claim unfair dismissal. Unfair dismissal is worth up to 1 year's pay maximum, okay? Presently capped at £118,000, roughly.
Yeah.
But not to put to get everybody worrying, is what that will mean is you will be allowed to dismiss somebody during their probationary period. So what will end up happening is everybody's going to really clamp down on the probationary period now. Yeah. Make sure you've got everything documented properly. These are the job title. This is what the position is. These are your duties. These are the expectations. Right, it hasn't been met. You're out.
Yeah. And you know what, Tosh?
Let it escalate and don't do something about it.
That's how employers should be doing it anyway. And yes. I think that this is, for me, I think that employers do, a lot of them do this. And I think the unfair dismissal, it is what it is. I can't argue with what the government are doing, because we can't do anything about it. But this is best practice approach to being a good employer anyway. And what I say about doing fair process with employees that you're exiting is that the employees that are staying are watching. So actually, this is only going to enhance organizations to be better employers. If they do need to let somebody go, they do it in a very fair and consistent way. But actually, the employees they keep will also feel, you know what, I'm working for a good employer. I like what they do and I like how they do it. So I just think it's raising the bar. If you want to look at the silver lining of this, is it will raise the bar of how employers engage with employees and have that consistency across the board, which I think builds that trust and confidence and ultimately makes them an employer of choice. So
I would say two things about that. I totally agree with you there. Meeting required standards. Where I would say, where I wouldn't agree is that people aren't doing it anyway. Because if they're doing it anyway, we wouldn't be having this place, put it in place in the first place, right? And I never get that, because what do people actually use the probationary period for? They put them in there and you get busy. And then what happens is they made the decision, and then they find that the person's not that good necessarily, but they've already made the decision. So you know what they do? They extend the probationary period, and then they put it on for a bit longer, and then maybe they can get rid of that person. And they can get rid of that person much more easily because of the less than 2 years rule. So what I'm saying quite openly to everybody is, look at your staff now, everybody under 2 years, and before 2027 hits, and make sure that anybody under 2 years that you don't want to be there is not there anymore. Because after 2027 hits, you're stuck, or you're going to have, it's more problematic. Sorry, is a better way to say it.
Yeah, there's more risk to doing it, or there's more consequences. What I would add to that is that if you are looking at a person, don't just sit them in a seat and let them get on with it and hang themselves by their own rope. Engage, work out what their challenges are, do the audit, do the training, and because I don't think anyone wants to sit there feeling like they're failing. Everybody wants to feel like they're winning, and they want to, they want to stay in the job. So, and if you're going to fail fast, get in there, have the conversation, work out what they need, train them, and then you've got the facts upon which to make the decisions.
Yeah, I totally agree. Here we're talking about, from an employer's point of view, it's getting the right workplace culture for that productivity, for the retention, for all the things that you're in business in the first place. Yeah. From a legal point of view, I want my clients to avoid costly, and that means in terms of money and time, claims as well. It takes so much time and effort, and just another stress factor. So all we're trying to do is get it right at the root, and then the rest of it will just follow, won't it?
Absolutely. And then that will then bring us right back to culture, how you treat, how you put yourselves forward as an employer of choice, how you induct somebody, how you onboard them, it's all of that. And we have other webinars on that, so we can't go into it today. But Tosh, have we got any more legal areas that we need to cover before we push forward?
I mean, I've got some notes here which talk about conducting stress risk assessments. We talked about that already. Providing manager training. We were talking about how do you get this across. Get your training in place, and if you don't know where you get that training, give Meeta a call. She'll put you in touch with the right people. If it's not her, we can do also training on these sorts of things. And also it's important to understand about retaliation risks, victimization. So where people bring up these things about stress, or people who raise those are legally protected from any kind of demotions or dismissals or any of those sorts of things, unless of course you follow the right process. So it's important to understand that you handle these things correctly, rather than reactively, so to speak. But generally, look, managing stress is just, it's not just compliance, it's just good for business. Don't just think you're ticking a box here. It really is, it is good for business. But if there's anybody that's dealing with things they don't know how to handle, please contact us. Meeta has my details. Maybe it'll go out with the recording.
We're going to go out. So with the recording, Tosh's details,
to see how I can help.
And my details will be there. We're also on LinkedIn. We have Pooja actually says, can you circulate the new laws and updates? Tosh, would we be able to send that out?
I can send you an email. Would you like to do that and send it with that? That's not a problem.
Wonderful. And a quick point from Heather, who says, how do you recommend we educate colleagues? To spot signs in themselves and feel safe to call it. That is culture. That is open conversations, leadership, leading by example, I would say. And the training, have a look at this burnout. So I think I'm just going to send the link to everyone. So if it's something you're interested in, you can sign up. There'll be online support. But I think the most important thing is create an environment where people feel confident and supported enough to come forward.
Great.
One more. We've got 1 minute, and I've got one more question, Tosh. I don't know if we're going to do it in time, but let's try. We have a question that says, how do you address when someone goes off with stress and one factor most likely contributing to that employer is starting PIP with them?
So you can't hide behind with a stress thing in terms of most things. The PIP process will continue in a sense, or any discipline will continue. So imagine the performance issues, they're not hitting their targets. Well, if they're not there, there's not, the PIP process just gets suspended, doesn't it? And then what takes over is an absent management process until we get them back. So they might delay it slightly, but not for very long. So if they end up going off sick with stress, guess what we do? We already covered it in this. We get the consent form, write to the doctor, find out what we can do to get them to come back, and we get them to come back. If that continues for an unreasonable period of time, then you go through a capability and they get dismissed that way.
Okay. Well, we've come full circle, because I think that was one of the first approaches we discussed as well. So I have just shared the results of the poll. Impact on the organisation was right up there. And I think we've covered a lot on that today. And legal responsibilities were second. So hopefully you've had a whistle-stop journey through workplace stress and how to manage it, overcome it, and how to get the legal structures in place. Tosh, what's your parting words for everyone today?
First of all, really great participation. I really like that. You really should make the use of these webinars and speakers and any of the ones that you attend. Get in touch with us. If you've really got any question, we're genuinely helpful people that would love to talk to you offline about your situation, see how we can help. Sometimes you just need somebody to, all the information's out there on the internet, I say, but it's about having somebody who knows how to put it all together. So talk to us, please, and we're happy to help.
Brilliant. I love that. And thank you, everyone, for your feedback. We're getting some feedback that this has been a useful session and giving everyone food for thought. What I would also add to that is sometimes you're enlightened and you're ready for the change, but your colleagues or your senior leadership might not be. Share this with them. Tell them to watch it in double time and just get an insight, or reach out to us and we can share some of the notes. But yeah, let's get moving this scale along in a direction that's going to help both the employer and employees have a stress-free environment.
Exactly. Whatever you do, don't stress.
Exactly. On that note, I'm going to say bye for now. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Tosh.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much. Take care.